Head over to patreon.com/MWilliamPhelps and sign up for my free content page, where I'll be interacting with you, doing live streams, posting exclusive content, and dropping a major limited series podcast exclusively for Patreon members. That's patreon.com/MWilliamPhelps. patreon.com/MWilliamPhelps. You meet the person of your dreams and ride off into the sunset, never spending a moment apart. Then one day, within 7 minutes, your lives are changed forever. 40-something years later, you sit and watch a man die, fulfilling a promise. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the true crime author of close to 50 books. I've dedicated the past 25 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. Love is an interesting creature, coming to us in many different forms. We hear stories of a couple meeting and knowing in an instant they were meant to be together for the rest of their lives. 19-year-old Randy White is sitting inside a pizza restaurant along the Florida Panhandle in Mariana one sunny afternoon when Cupid's lightning bolt of an arrow strikes him in the heart. As Randy sits, in walks a beautiful young woman. So struck by her, Randy later tells several reporters, "The second she walked in, I said, 'Who the heck is that young lady?'" At first, he is taken by what he called her absolutely gorgeous looks. Her name is Janet, though she goes by her middle name, Renee. She stands at the counter and orders a slice of pizza, unaware in that moment Randy is watching and has become smitten. After getting her pizza, Renee begins walking around searching for a place to sit down and enjoy her lunch. Randy figures this is his only chance, his one opportunity to meet the girl of his dreams. He gets up from his seat, takes Renee by the wrist and says, "Sit with me." "I don't know you," she says. "Today, I might mention, you'd likely be attacked and then arrested for grabbing a patron by the wrist and leading them over to your seat." It was a different time then, in the 1970s. "That don't matter," Randy says. "Sit down." Renee relents and sits. They begin talking. And from that night on, Randy tells reporters, "I saw her every night until we got married 10 weeks later." That is a true Hollywood romance, almost unheard of today. I don't hear of anyone doom scrolling on a dating app and being struck by Cupid from staring at a digital image. And these days, if you even smile at someone in a restaurant or supermarket, you are viewed as some sort of weirdo deviant. But anyway, Randy called their feelings for each other flipped upside down crazy. The stuff of romance novels, indeed. And yet in Randy and Renee's life, it is as real as the Florida sunshine they live under every day. Renee has this striking smile, drawing you in, and thick, slightly curly, dark brown, maybe even black hair, just brushing past her shoulders. She has pointed cheekbones. She embodies the image of a woman confident and self-assured. She works at State Farm Insurance in Lynn Haven, Florida, and is going to school at night to earn a degree in business so she can one day open her own insurance company. Randy does sales for Maxwell House Coffee. The one thing about Renee is her spontaneity and insistence on living in the moment. She will make decisions about things to do and tell Randy, "I'm going alone, or you can come with me." Of course, Randy always went. It didn't matter to him where they were, as long as they were together. By 1982, the couple has been married 8 years. Randy now 27, Renee 24. At this time, Renee starts talking about children. She wants to have a baby, she tells Randy. And of course, he agrees. Where Renee works, the town of Lynnhaven, there is about 15,000 people at that time, perhaps even less. Lynnhaven is north of Panama City, not too far east from the tip of the handle on the pan. And the town is considered part of the Panama City metro area. The sand along the beaches there is white as talcum powder and just as soft. I've spent some time in the area tracking serial killers. The beach areas are beautiful and clean. It's once you get outside the city limits and into what is the deep south that things can get a little bit backcountry and even sketchy. There is not a lot of work available in the outskirts away from the beach areas. Not a lot of tourists, and crime rates can spike. This particular area, from Panama City west along the shoreline to Fort Walton Beach and Pensacola, has produced a wide variety of high-profile killers throughout the past 50 years. Farther west into Okaloosa County, during the mid-'80s, serial killer Frank Walsh stalked and killed, with authorities believing his total being at 5 that they know about. I investigated a case of 2 brothers in the Destin area who killed several women and buried them on their family's property. I don't have to tell anyone who listens to or watches true crime that Florida, for whatever reason, has a long history of infamous murderers. But even more than that, the state has a reputation for criminals flocking to the area and committing all sorts of violent assaults and brutal rapes. During the weekend of June 12th and 13th, 1982, Renee and Randy head out to Shell Island, a nature reserve community along the Panhandle's Gulf coastline, an area reachable then only by ferry or private boat. It is a family-friendly area with some of the most pristine beaches and natural views of nature Florida has to offer. Visitors enjoy snorkeling and watching the dolphins. It turned out to be an incredible weekend with all the romance and fun a couple so madly in love would enjoy. Randy and Renee just adored one another and had spent every day since being married together, not one day apart. So connected, they would often meet for lunch at their home in Lynnhaven during the week. Janet loved the television soap opera Days of Our Lives, so she'd go home every day to tune in and eat her lunch. Oftentimes, Randy would join her. On that Monday, June 14th, 1982, just back from their romantic weekend, somewhere close to noon, they meet at home and have a nice lunch together. Randy makes sandwiches while Renee sits and watches her favorite television show. If there is one thing Randy always made sure of on these days, it was that Renee made it back to work on time and safe. So after lunch, they hop into their vehicles and head off to Renee's office, Randy following behind his wife. As they enter the parking lot, Randy doesn't just drive past, tap the horn, and wave goodbye and go about his way to work. He always makes sure Renee gets into the office, and then off he goes. Turns out on this day, Renee's boss, the only other person in the office besides her, told Renee he was going out on the road to hit up some local businesses with sales calls and wouldn't be back until mid-afternoon. Just before Randy and Renee arrive at the office, there is someone out back, out of sight, a man. He is skulking around, looking for a way into the building, and then into the office where Renee works. This man had been stalking the building, just waiting for the right time to make his move. And I'll come back to this in a little bit and explain how and when he had become obsessed with Renee. So Renee parks her vehicle, gets out and begins walking into the building. And there is Randy, sitting inside his vehicle, watching her. He does even beep his horn on this day, and then he blows her a kiss goodbye, surely just counting the moments until they will be home eating dinner together later on. Confident Renee is safely inside the office, Randy takes off and makes his way back to his job at Maxwell House Coffee. Just at that moment, as Renee unlocks the front door into the office as fast as she can, she hears the phone ringing. For a growing business, any call is an important call. Renee picks up the line. "State Farm, how can I help you?" she says. This time, it's a friend of Renee's, not a potential client. "Hi, Renee," her friend says, but Renee doesn't answer back. Instead, her friend hears Renee let out a terrible shriek, a scream, before dropping the phone. Her friend begins listening, panicking, wondering what is going on. But whatever it is she hears, Renee's friend understands it is very, very bad. She can hear shuffling about, yelling, things being knocked off desks and broken. There is a struggle of some sort going on inside the office, and Renee is involved. So the friend hangs up and calls 911 to report that something bad is happening inside Renee's office, and she is the only employee there. I need to take my first break of the show. Thanks for listening to this podcast. I'm extremely grateful for your continued support. I'll be right back in a minute with more Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps. Earlier on that morning of June 14th, 1982, Renee is sitting behind her desk doing some paperwork. She looks up and in walks a delivery driver. Not unheard of, obviously, an office receiving a delivery. Renee and a guy named Cale Barrington Bates exchange a few words. He hands over the package, she signs for it, and then Bates leaves. And that was all it took. Bates sits there in the parking lot for a bit after leaving the office. And he is now obsessing over Renee. He's got to have her. He will have her, he decides in that moment. So Bates makes the choice to take what he wants, regardless of the consequences, regardless of the rights of the woman, regardless of the law, regardless of anything but his narcissistic needs and wants. This is now all about what Cale Bates wants. He has decided the fate of another human being based on his lack of empathy and total lack of respect for a woman. I say all of that because of what will happen in this case 40-something years later. It's important, at least for me, to keep in mind what transpires in those moments after Cale Bates walks into Renee's office doing his job and walks out making that decision to violate another human being's rights and space and ultimately their life. In the type of case we are dealing with here, especially the state in which this crime takes place, and even a promise Randy will fulfill 4 decades later. The premeditation and thought process of Cale Bates in those moments after he meets Renee, it's all imperative, very important within the scope of what will later transpire. That scream Renee let out on the phone, her friend later recalls to police, was bone-chilling. Something, obviously, she will never forget. Bates had waited in the parking lot for Renee to leave for lunch before breaking into the office, in, back, through a window. He then hid inside the office and waited for her to return. So Bates knew Renee was alone in the office. He likely watched her coworker boss leave, or even maybe asked Renee when he went in to deliver the package if she was alone. In any event, Cale Bates saw an opportunity, took advantage of the situation, and acted upon his own will, and very important, intentionally. He knew what he was doing. He knew it was wrong. He knew that he was about to hurt somebody. Again, all very important later on. The struggle between Cale Bates and Renee goes on for a few minutes. This, as the police are, in that moment, as the two of them fight on the way to the office. Realizing this wasn't going to be easy for him, and that Renee wasn't intimidated by this sociopath, Bates forces Renee out the door and drags her into a wooded area behind the building. Renee continues to fight him best she can. Bates is a big man, strong. Renee, not so much. She's petite and much smaller. At one point, Bates tears Renee's wedding ring off her finger, causing very serious injuries to that finger, now adding robbery and kidnapping and assault. He hits her repeatedly. Renee ultimately ends up with over 30 contusions, bruises, abrasions, and laceration. 30. Consider that for a second. 30 injuries. That guy wailed on this poor woman. Then, of course, the motivating factor of his attack comes into play as he attempts to rape Renee. This as she continues to fight back. Unable to complete that task the way in which he had fantasized about, Bates then puts his slimy hands around Renee's neck and he begins strangling her. This all takes place in the back of the office in that wooded area, as I mentioned. With that rape not working out entirely the way he had planned, Bates then brandishes a knife and stabs Renee twice in the chest. And she dies, quote, from a totality of her wounds a few minutes later. All of this takes place within 7 minutes of Randy blowing her that kiss goodbye. Before Randy was even back at work himself, his wife, the absolute love of his life, is dead. All because some scum of the earth delivers a package to an office, decides he is going to rape a woman, and then carries out that plan. A plan, I should say, that goes totally off the rails, as law enforcement is now racing toward this scene and right down the block as Bates is hightailing it out of those woods. I cannot emphasize the nature of this love story between Renee and Randy enough. We hear about these types of romances and think, okay, yeah, I get it, but it's being played up a bit. I would agree with you in most situations, with this being the exception. This murder is going to crush this guy, absolutely suck the life out of his soul. You have your entire life planned out with the love of your life. Kids, a house, a business, parties and birthdays and grandchildren and vacations, and it is swiped from you in 7 minutes. In 420 seconds, your future is taken from you. Your wife's life, just getting started, done. By a piece of garbage who decided he was going to take what he wanted. None of that seems even remotely fair. Randy takes a call at his office to return to the insurance office where Renee works immediately. Something is happening. Randy, of course, races over there. He gets out of his vehicle, sees police cars and chaos going on, and he is wondering what in the hell is happening. All he's been told at this point is that there's been an emergency. Deputies quickly approach Randy and tell him to get into one of the deputies' cars and he will be taken to the sheriff's office. Inside that deputy's vehicle, Randy sees the chaplain. Never a good sign. Where is Renee? Where is Renee? Randy keeps repeating. What is going on here? The chaplain looks at Randy, his face withdrawn. There is no easy way for me to say this to you, but Renee has been murdered. They need you to go down to the sheriff's office and identify some of her things for them. And then we come to Cale Bates, who, as police were arriving on the scene, was walking, not running, walking out of the woods. The guy doesn't even have the slightest chance of ever getting away with this murder. They see him, they jump out of their vehicles, and they take Bates into custody without any incident and transport him down to the station house. He'd just raped and killed a woman, nearly ripping her finger off to steal her wedding ring. And he is caught within moments after committing those crimes. Bay County Sheriff Frank McKeithen walks into the interrogation room where Bates is being held. They had found Renee's wedding ring in his front pocket. Her blood still on that ring. Bates is interviewed for 7 hours and then charged with Renee's murder. 7 minutes to 7 hours. In 1 hour short of a workday, Randy and Renee's life went from bliss to misery. All because of this guy who is now being processed and booked. In March 1983, Bates is found guilty of first-degree murder. This is Florida, remember, the state where criminal courts rarely play games. During the sentencing phase, the judge imposes the death penalty. As Randy is sitting there, he makes a promise to his wife. I will be there for every trial, every hearing, every appeal, and I will seek justice for you, even if that includes watching Cale Bates die by execution. I'll be right back after one more short break. I have to include one quote here Randy gave to ABC News 13 in the year 2022. And the reason for that is that Randy made a point to say he wanted Renee to be remembered more than a victim of murder. And I totally get that. Within the space of true crime today being so exploitive and oversaturated. My most memorable thing about her is she always had that smile, Randy says. And she was always happy. I never saw her when she wasn't smiling or being receptive to anybody that came around her. She was a really outgoing individual, a really, really good person. For those close to Renee, the idea that Cale Bates took a life, but still had his own life in the year 2022 was difficult to reconcile with, seeing that he had been sentenced to death over 40 years ago. Randy kind of gave the same opinion about the death penalty I have maintained throughout most of my life. We either have a death penalty or don't have a death penalty, Randy said. But this 40-year grace period is unacceptable. I think that's true. If you've been sentenced to death, go through your appeals process, take it through the courts, and then, when all agree the sentence is justified and legal, carry that sentence out or don't sentence someone to death. Otherwise, it's not a deterrent of any kind. And I don't even know that it is to begin with. And if you cannot get that job done in Florida, something isn't working right. For years after Renee's death, Randy had been destroyed. He became a recluse and completely antisocial. His life had exploded. Randy remained single for 14 years. Cale Bates appealed his sentence all the way up to the Supreme Court into 2022 and even beyond. I did not think it possible an appeal could run 40-plus years long, but there you go. I have read through the appeal and will not bore you with all the legal jargon and backhanded meandering by defense and appellate attorneys and how they can spin things. It is all ridiculous nonsense. In this case, there could not be any stronger, more powerful evidence that Bates committed this murder. There is zero doubt. Cale Bates, heading into the summer of 2025, was 67 years old. Randy, 70 years old. At 6:17 p.m. on August 20th, 2025, Randy sat inside the death row unit where they execute prisoners in Florida and watched as the curtain behind the glass opened. Bates was strapped to a table, a solution of death in bottles hanging nearby and tubes going into his arms. Bates's execution would be the 10th in the year 2025 in Florida. So they are playing for keeps down there. Bates chose not to have a last meal or say any last words before the executioner applied the final solution and the liquid began its path through the tubes and put him to sleep forever. And just like that, 42 years after he committed such a horrible, cowardly act of raping, beating, torturing, and finally killing a young woman, the sentence the court gave him was carried out. That is justice, I reckon. Straightforward and quick, Randy said of watching the execution, which was a hell of a lot more than Renee White received from Bates on the day he brutalized and then murdered her. Randy promised Renee he would be there for it. There he was. That's it for this week. Be safe. Be aware. Sources for this episode include Remembering Renee by Tom Lewis, 13 ABC News, June 15th, 2022. Husband witnesses wife's killer executed. I Made a Promise by Zoe Hussein, August 20th, 2025, New York Post. Supreme Court of Florida decision, Cale Bates versus State of Florida, August 12th, 2025. Crossing the Line is executive produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, and Matthew Valentinus, Mom's Basement Management. Written by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell. Music by Epidemic Sound. Original music written and performed by Thomas Mooney, Tom Phelps, and Matt Russell.